Good morning, Joanna.
Hi there.
Hi there.
Hi.
Well, it all sounds wonderful. And I have to say, every time any politician stands up of any political party and says, well, we're going to build more homes, we're going to build more affordable homes, we want people to have lovely homes that they can afford, everyone stands up and applauds. How are they going to do it?
Well, the key thing about this is that he has stated very clearly that this current definition of affordable housing, this rather Orwellian definition of affordable housing that we have, is just, it's simply got to go. And that's the main problem, because at the moment, affordable housing is actually defined as up to 80% of market rent or market value. So it's not remotely affordable to the majority of people. So that's actually the first and the most important part of the policy. Then the second
So,
part of the
so just
policy.
simply, so just simply changing that definition would mean that when councils award planning deals to companies to build, X number of fancy homes that do cost a load of money, but they have to build a certain percentage of affordable homes, that will mean that those affordable homes genuinely are affordable.
Well, to put it in simple terms, basically yes, because what's happened is that the system has morphed and it's just turned into something really quite farcical, where the affordable proportion just isn't affordable at all. So you just get an entirely luxury apartment development. So, I mean, the issue in a lot of British cities, particularly London and Manchester, is actually a lot of homes are being built. All you need to do is look around the skyline. You see all the cranes
Yep.
and the tower blocks going up. Loads of apartments are being built, but they're completely unaffordable. And actually, lots of them are empty. They're just simply for foreign investors. So instead of building those, we need to build genuinely affordable housing.
I mean, again, I would agree with all of that, but how are we
It's
going to
hard
pay
not
for
to,
it?
isn't it?
I know. I don't understand anyone wouldn't, but everybody. I mean, I remember when had the last election interviewing everybody about this. Everyone was going to build more homes. Every London mayor's going to build new homes. Everybody,
Well, yes, exactly. But
but they
you
don't
see,
actually do it. So
well,
where are we going to build these homes, and how are we going to pay for building these homes?
there's a real ideological difference here, because the Conservative Party approach to it is we will allow the market to build as many homes as it can without intervening, and then you get all of this luxury apartment block development with barely any affordable housing, and this definition of affordable housing having been changed to this sort of ridiculous view. What Jeremy Corbyn is proposing, which isn't, anything any more radical than what most European countries do, is actually to have a level of intervention in how the housing system works and say, actually, a lot of the housing provided needs to be affordable. A lot of the public land that is already owned by public sector bodies needs to be put aside for social housing, perhaps in joint ventures with housing associations. That's what they do in Zurich, for example. In Zurich, the municipal authority there has said that all the public sector land has to be given to joint ventures with housing associations. Here, Transport for London owns masses of land in London, but they've said all their public sector land has to be joint ventures with private developers for the kind of luxury apartment developments that we just don't need. So it's a question of approach.
Yeah, I mean, there is. I mean, there is also a question of whether you think the demand is the issue or the supply is the issue. I mean, there are a lot of people buying second homes, and there've been moves to sort of talk about, preventing, higher taxes, higher council tax for homes that are empty and the like. There are obviously a higher stamp duty now for buy-to-rent properties that has helped to cool the market a little bit. Foreign buyers, of course. Now there are lots of places. I mean, Sydney in Australia, you can't buy a property as
Well,
a
for
foreign
sure.
buyer, and in Switzerland you can't. But then there's also an issue of things like, I mean, I would certainly be in favour of getting rid of right to buy your council house. If you need a council home, I'm really glad you've got one. When you don't need one anymore and you're in a position to buy your home, you don't need a council flat anymore. I think you should move out. But I think we should be I think we should be turfing out hundreds of thousands of people who don't need their council homes anymore. I know people myself
Well,
who
I
live in
don't think
council
that's
properties
I don't
who've got
think that's
no
really the
business
issue.
being in them.
Well,
Why not? Why do you think people
look,
on
I
solid
mean,
incomes, on good,
I
really
think
well
I
above
think
average income,
that's
should be
a
in
red
council
herring.
homes?
Where we have such an enormous housing
No,
crisis,
no,
where
no.
the
But
majority
that
of people in a
every little
city like
helps.
London can't afford to pay their rent. They pay more than 50% of their income. When homelessness is soaring, we've got thousands of people sleeping on the streets. I think it really is a red herring to talk about people who live in council homes and don't.
No. I'm not saying that's the solution.
Oh,
I'm saying it is one of the factors that I would like to look at. It's a tiny,
honestly,
Anna.
Really not.
Anna, it's a tiny factor in it, but it is a factor I would like to tackle because we have got a shortage of council homes, and I would like to make sure they are going to people who need them. Now, you talked about homelessness. You and I both know. You say thousands of homeless. It's in the. Listen, if you could listen for a second, it's in a few of the thousands. About half of the people who are sleeping rough on this country streets, the official statistics show, are actually foreign nationals. So I'm not quite sure why, as someone who comes from Romania and sleeps on the streets of my city, it is my problem or indeed the government's problem. I'd say just, I'm sorry, time to go home. If you haven't got anywhere to live, you shouldn't be in my country. As I would expect them to say to me if I was doing exactly the same thing.
I think there's a danger of the conversation splitting into sort of all sorts of different discussions here. And, if we want to talk about the housing crisis, which is affecting people who can't afford to pay soaring rents, who can't afford to get mortgages to buy homes. Clearly there's a big problem. We're building.
No, but you raised homeless. No, Anna, let's go. No, we've got plenty of time. You raised homelessness.
There are people
who are homeless. It's got nothing to do with the price of housing. It's got nothing to do with it.
Can I talk about the homeless people that I think are relevant to this discussion? The homeless people that are relevant to this discussion are the people who are made homeless because they cannot afford to pay the rent increases which are happening all the time on their properties. So they slip into this rising level of street homelessness. Now, obviously, there are lots of factors behind this really quite substantial level of people on the streets. But what I'm particularly
it's a few thousand people. It's not. I mean, I'm sorry. It's a few thousand too many.
To be honest, I don't. I mean, the statistics change all the time. I live in London, so I see it all the time. I see people outside stations. I see people.
But it's not substantial. Of 3,000 or 4,000 people, and half of those are foreign. It's not a substantial number.
When I was researching my book last year, I wrote a book about the housing crisis. I spoke to people who were in the position of not being able to afford private sector rents and having fallen into homelessness. Now, they were sleeping on buses. Would you call them street homeless? Well, I think you probably would, wouldn't you? I mean, who would want to sleep on a bus?
But Anna, there is an issue. It's something I looked into the last few years of councils actually now having an official policy when, for instance, a landlord says we're going to put the rent up and they can't afford it, the housing benefit won't cover it, and they have to leave, or when the landlord says I'm just getting new tenants in, or whatever the situation is, I'm selling the property. If they go to the local council, they can give them 6 months' notice or 2 months' notice. The council says, well,
that doesn't happen.
No, Anna, I've spoken to Anna, let me finish one point, seriously. They go to the council. I've spoken to dozens and dozens of people working in this field and people it's happened to. The council basically says, you stay there until you're evicted. We won't rehouse you or consider rehousing you until you are officially homeless and you're evicted. So we're seeing people officially made homeless so that the council will actually act. The council could just act long before.
That's true. And
exactly.
That's true, but that's a policy issue. The councils won't rehouse people.
It's a stupid policy issue.
It is a stupid policy. They won't rehouse people until they have been made unintentionally homeless. What's happening now is the moment people are made unintentionally homeless, they are offered some housing, but quite often they're offered housing outside of the city in which they live, because there is such a shortage of social housing. And that's another huge crisis. I mean, what's behind all of this issue is that these days housing benefit doesn't meet the cost of a private sector rent. And what you've seen is that since we've had such a dramatic drop in social housing, a third of all people living in social housing live in private rented properties. But housing benefit is quite a lot now below the level of private sector rents. And the idea was that was to come in to cut the housing benefit bill, which is so massive. But actually, it hasn't cut the bill because rents just keep going up. And it means that people can't afford to pay their rent, so they keep getting evicted. Okay. And it's just a really terrible situation.
But there there is also, people don't have a right to live in any particular part of town or any. I understand if you're moved out of your actual city, but we've also got an issue, and this hasn't been tackled a lot by Labour, given that they were not Jeremy Corbyn, but only Tony Blair. A policy of bringing in between 4.5 and 5 million people to the country, which is the total number, the net migration to the UK since 1997, including the children who've been born to people who come to this country, largely from the EU. The huge net migration figures. No real extra housing policy was put in place in terms of building more homes. If you bring in a few million extra people and you don't build enough houses to counter them, of course demand is going to go up while supply is static, and of course prices are going to go up.
It's simply not that. It's not that straightforward. It's not. There are lots more people now, and we're not building enough homes. Therefore, you've got a problem. It's much more complicated than that. Basically, we have had 30 years in which the stock of social housing has, we've lost 2 million homes, in the last 30 years. We've completely changed our policies. Instead of building affordable housing, we give people housing benefit to live in private rented properties. But over the last couple of years, we don't give them enough housing benefit so that they keep getting evicted. So it's really much more complicated, as policy always is, than to say, it's just about, X number come in.
Well, it's not. At no point have I said it's just about. That whole point of this, there are a variety of different causes for this problem involving supply and demand. And if we don't tackle all of those issues, we're going to be a bit surprised when policies don't work. But Anna, I'm going to have to leave it there. I'm way over time, as I always do, because I just get so involved in the conversation. But thank you so much. I think we can end on a note of agreement. Is we would like there to be more houses built. Can we at least agree on that? Yes, I think we've lost her on the line. Yes, actually, we can agree on that. Thank you very much. Anna Minton, author of Big Capital and Ground Control, a reader and architect at the University of East London. Fascinating conversation. Thank you to her.